Hello cave dwellers, when is a computer not a computer? Well, when it's a CDTV apparently, which does not stand for compact disc television as you might assume. It stands for the completely nonsensical Commodore's Dynamic Total Vision. And I'm lucky enough to have a boxed one. I don't know that it's complete, but we'll find out as we unpack it today. And we go through the process. You know the drill. We're going to learn the history of the machine. We're going to see if it works, and we're going to demonstrate it over the next few episodes of this Trash to Treasure series. And I'm really excited about this one. You might assume that I would have had the same reaction to this as I had to the Amiga 600 if you watched that series, a machine which I absolutely hated. And like the Amiga 600, I remember when I saw this CDTV in the shops, I thought Commodore were making a big mistake with it. But I didn't have the same angry reaction as I did to the Amiga 600 because while I considered it to be a poor decision by Commodore to try and do precisely what they went on to do with the A600, that is to say repackage an existing Amiga, the Amiga 500 computer, and sell it under the guise of something different, I still wanted it. And I wanted it because it looks so damn good. I know that defied all common sense and logic, which was screaming, you've already got this machine, you've got an Amiga 500, it just doesn't have a CD drive. But I wanted it so badly. I wanted it in a hi-fi stack system with some Technics tape decks and an FM receiver and an amp hooked up and massive floor standing speakers. But that dream never came true because at a retail price of £599 here in the UK and $999 in the US, this was not an impulse buy. And against all logic, reason, rational thought, I had to own one of these. Admittedly, I didn't buy one in 1991. It was just too expensive and I couldn't justify it. So it took the best part of 3 decades to get hold of one. And it was thanks to a chap named Graham. If you're watching, Graham, thank you so much for helping me to get hold of this one. Now, why did Commodore want this to exist? Well, remember, this is the start of the 90s. The buzzword is multimedia. And Commodore obviously thought they were in the right place at the right time and with the right hardware to take advantage and surf that multimedia wave that was ushered in at the start of the 90s. Did they make a good decision? Well, let's take a quick look at the history of this machine now, and then we'll come back for testing. Multimedia is the word of the day today, a word we associate with the arrival of the first computers and consoles with a CD-ROM drive, and the huge increase in capacity on low-priced media that came with it. We often think of the early 90s as being the period of the multimedia revolution. With hindsight though, Commodore's Amiga 1000 computer launched in 1985 and it's sometimes referred to as the very first multimedia computer, not because it had a CD-ROM drive, it didn't, but because of its video and audio capabilities when compared to the competition at the time.
Here are some custom chips, specially designed chips. These two here handle the graphics and the animation, and this one handles just the sound. So the processor doesn't have to do all the thinking for the machine, it can delegate certain specialist tasks.
And it's this Amiga foundation that the CDTV would be built upon. In March 1991, the Commodore Dynamic Total Vision, it really is a silly name, hit retail stores, having been announced in the summer of 1990. In this same year, 1990, Commodore launched their new flagship machine, the Amiga 3000. The A3000 was launched by President of Commodore International, Harold Copperman, and he called the launch event Multimedia Live. At this event, Copperman said,
"It's our turn, it's our time. We had the technology 4.5 years ago. In fact, we had the product ready for multimedia before multimedia was ready for a product. Today we're improving the technology and we're in the catbird seat. It is our time, it is Commodore's time."
Commodore knew then that the advent of affordable CD-ROM drives coupled with their machine's capabilities could make for a killer combination, but given that they had already had such a capable machine in the Amiga 1000 and then the more affordable Amiga 500 and the 2000 models through the 80s, it's a wonder that they hadn't got on the CD-ROM bandwagon even sooner. The story goes that it wasn't on Commodore's orders, but as a result of a small team of Commodore engineers working secretly behind the scenes in 1989, that a CD-ROM drive was first attached to an Amiga, and demos were created to try and convince managers that the platform had potential when paired up with a CD. 1989 being the same year that Fujitsu released the FM Towns computer in Japan with an integrated CD-ROM drive, and the Japanese games console, the PC Engine, had already received a CD-ROM add-on upgrade. So it's early days, but it was too late to call Commodore's work with CD-ROMs pioneering. Likewise, Philips had seemingly forever been working on a CD-ROM based system called the CDI, or Compact Disc Interactive.
CDI does the work of a CD-ROM, a VCR, a video game unit, and a CD player, all in one. And it's yours for just 8 payments of only $62.50.
The CDI format specification had even been added to the Rainbow Books, that's a collection of CD format specifications, in 1986. It went into the Green Book in that collection of Rainbow Books, laying out the CDI format. And so Commodore, having seen this demonstration from their engineers and considered the competition, decided that just releasing a CD-ROM add-on for their existing machines wasn't the solution. No, of course not. That would be far too easy, Commodore. They decided that they should put this technology in a box that would be welcomed into living rooms. It would be as friendly and as familiar as a VCR and easy enough for your grandparents to use. And so the team was assembled. Don Gilbreth was tasked with the hardware design of the CDTV at Commodore, Gail Wellington was responsible for sourcing applications for the device, and perhaps of finding that elusive killer app in the process which could make or break a system's sales. Carl Sassenrath came on board. He's the man who worked on the original Amiga operating system, and when it comes to adding a CD-ROM to an Amiga, he's quoted as saying,
"In many ways, it was what we had originally dreamed for the Amiga."
And this one may come as a surprise to you. To help raise the profile of the system and push it into new markets, Commodore hired Nolan Bushnell, the founder of Atari, a company who was in fierce competition with Commodore.
We decided to package it like a piece of fine audio gear to make it very user-friendly and usable in a living room environment. We really didn't want to build a computer. We wanted to build an entertainment and educational platform for the whole family. It's sort of the center of the educational hearth, if you would, or the center of the library of the future. And in a library you have movies and sounds and books of fiction, books of reference, and we wanted to bring all that together into the home.
Nolan, of course, not at the helm anymore. That Atari ship was now being steered by Jack Tramo, as it had been since 1984. But killer apps, hardware specification, what flavour processor was in this thing, none of that was the headline here. Notice on the box, you won't find a single mention of the word Amiga anywhere here despite the hardware that's inside it, and we will look inside shortly. There is a full-blown Amiga computer in there, but you wouldn't know it from looking at it. The CDTV then was announced at the Consumer Electronics Show in June of 1990, where it was demonstrated and developers were encouraged in the back room to come on board and develop launch titles for the system.
Independent software developers, who most of whom were Amiga developers, because that was the strength of the CDTV, that the same tools worked. But the big difference, of course, was that it was going to be the product would be delivered on CD, and the user interface would be different because it was a remote control. So those were the main adaptations that was required. So I had to go to all of my developer friends that I developed over the years and tell them what was coming. And we had a demonstration that was sort of cobbled together out of a separate CD player, a remote control that sort of worked, and some hardware. And we took it to CES, Consumer Electronics Show, and put it in a trailer and not on the main exhibit floor. So we were out in the parking lot, and I was doing demonstrations like every half hour for 4 days. to developers, but because it was a trailer, it was small. So it was a few at a time, but that was good because it gave them a chance to get up close. They were excited. And to be perfectly honest, Neil, it was a great concept. And the Commodore concept, or the Commodore opportunity there, was much stronger than CDI that Philips was developing. And the reason being that Philips had put people in charge of the software development that were all Hollywood types. And so everything was a big, huge production. So one year I went to CES and was in the trailer. The next year I was on the floor of CES with CDTV with probably 15 to 20 titles that were developed enough to be able to let people try and play with them. And the Philips people from California came over and they were flabbergasted. They couldn't figure out how we'd done it, how we could have so many titles to show. It's because we weren't trying to make them Hollywood perfect with lots of glitz and glamour and not much playability.
The original release date was Christmas of 1990. It was an ambitious release date to have it ready, and it did slip back. We next saw the CDTV make an appearance at CES in Las Vegas in January of 1991, along with peripherals including a trackball. And the first finished units appeared at the World of Amiga show in April of 1991, where they began to be sold. More than 30 launch titles were ready for the machine, and Commodore promised another 100 titles in the works. That was impressive on the face of it.
The biggest challenge was that pressing a CD in those days was cheap. Mastering the first one was very expensive. So we bought a machine and operated a machine so people would get their code to us and we would create a CD for them to actually use and test and demonstrate before they went and had it pressed. That was a big edge in getting the developer community behind us.
But how, I wonder, would this brave new machine fare? Would it be accepted into homes en masse, or would it become another casualty of the cutthroat world of tech and Commodore's famously disjointed marketing talents? Trying to squeeze a computer into a set-top box and put it in your lounge is not a crazy idea by any stretch of the imagination, and I think Commodore were onto something. But whether or not they executed it with any kind of success, we'll find out a little later in the series. But I imagine you already know the answer to that, given the scarcity of these machines. So we know it's based on the Amiga 500 hardware, but just what's inside there. The sleeves are rolled up. Let's get the screwdrivers and open it up, and we'll see if we find any nice or nasty surprises in addition to that A500 based hardware. We'll have a look at all the ports, and we will unwrap the secrets of the CDTV. The CDTV is considered to be an Amiga 500 with a CD drive, so for reference, here's an A500. Which, considering it has a keyboard built in and is about 4 years younger, really shouldn't be too hard to consolidate and squeeze into the size of that CDTV case. A quick look at the rear showed ports familiar and foreign to an Amiga 500. Familiar to us are the disk drive, serial and parallel ports, and also the RGB video output. And there's the phono audio, which is essential really if it's going to be part of a hi-fi separate system. New here though are ports for an external keyboard, and a wired peripheral, a trackball perhaps. There's a built-in power supply, and yes, MIDI ports. The Amiga 500's rival, the Atari ST, of course, had bragging rights that it had MIDI ports as standard. Well, here's your answer to that, an Amiga with MIDI ports as standard. There's also an expansion port with a blanking plate over it, so we've got something to learn about that as we get more familiar with the system. I think I've seen that SCSI adapters are available for that, which would be very useful. And next to that is a video slot. Now this is interesting because it has an aerial pass-through, so you can relay your TV antenna or VCR through it to the TV and then tune the TV in. And it also has a composite video output. I remember on my old A500 the composite output is monochrome, so I'd be interested to see if this one's in colour. The video slot also had another option though, apparently. According to the manual here, there's a SCART option. Again, useful for relaying through your other SCART devices into your TV, but in terms of using this on its own, if you need it, you can just use a SCART to DB23 cable on the RGB video output, so we're not missing out on anything by not having it today. Another interesting feature is this slot which I found on the front. This is for a memory card because of course the CD being read-only, well, where do you store your files? Where do you save your work to or your saved games? Well, without buying external storage peripherals like a floppy disk drive, you can slot a memory card into here, and it looks a bit like a PCMCIA slot, but it isn't. This is a proprietary slot for the CDTV. So to look inside, just 4 screws need to come out of the sides, and then we'll take a peek inside. And all we're doing today is just getting our first impressions on what we've got here. We will tear it down fully and perform maintenance and repairs in part 2, so there's a lot more to see. And there is our CDTV. It's a revision 2.2 board according to the silkscreen. And we can see that no, it's not an Amiga 500 board just dropped into the case. It is a completely redesigned PCB. But all of the chips familiar to Amiga fans are present, and many of them are socketed, which is always a nice bonus. On the right hand side is the integrated power supply, nice and tidy compared to the usual brick power supply that you get caught under your feet on an Amiga. And at its heart is the workhorse of so many micros of this era, the Motorola 68000 CPU running at a little under 8 MHz, so there's no speed records being broken here and no improvement on a stock Amiga 500. We've got 1 MB of RAM at the bottom left of the board here, and there's also a connector over here which we'll need to investigate what that might be used for. Extra RAM perhaps? We'll put that on the list of things to find out more about. A quick glance around and we can see that we've got all of the chips that we'd find on an A500. Agnes, in fact it's a later revision of Agnes named Fat Agnes. There's Denise, the video processor, Polar, the audio chip, good old Gary is in there. The more you look, the more you see familiar chips as an Amiga owner. It is very much an Amiga 500 in here. There were some surprises in here though. It's the first time I've had the pleasure of opening up a CDTV, and I wasn't expecting this daughter board in the middle here. Now ordinarily you'd find your Kickstart ROMs here, and supplementary ROMs to provide some of the extras needed for the CD drive, for the system to talk to the LCD display driver, and of course the lovely CDTV splash screen when you turn it on, which we'll see shortly. But instead of just ROMs, I've got this daughter board, and on looking into it further, it appears to be a flash memory card. So this is a card that was originally provided to developers, and it allows you to flash it so you can tweak and develop the ROMs without having to take them out and flash them each and every time that you change them. This board would normally have only been supplied to members of the CATS team, or the Commodore Amiga Technical Support. So that's kind of cool, and I was excited that I might have something rare on my hands, but on discussing it with other owners, it seems that it is a fairly common board to find, so no super rare dev kit here I'm afraid, but it is a nice bonus to find in here. So that's our first quick look inside. We'll see some more of it while we work on it soon, but I do wonder if it works. So let's power it on for a test. It's time then for the moment of truth, the plug-in test. Do we need to repair this? What kind of condition is it in? Cosmetically, it's actually in fantastic condition inside and out, so I've got high hopes for this. The capacitors look fine, can't see any bulging capacitors, at least on the layer that I've looked at, and we will strip this down in the next part to see if there's anything lurking underneath, but I can't wait. I've got to plug it in and test it. So here we go, we'll plug it in, and the first thing that we notice is it's kind of gone into a standby mode because the clock's come on the front there. Power button's over here, but before we turn it on I have to have my CD ready because the CDs of course go in a caddy. I remember these caddies well. We used to have these on the Acorn Archimedes in our school library. I guess it offered a kind of a level of protection once the CD was in the drive, but you're still taking them out and putting them in. I don't know what the thinking was there. It's almost like a floppy disk mentality that you have to put it in. And something that was repeated on a smaller scale, I guess, with mini discs. They were kind of similar to this. Anyway, we'll turn it on without the CD in and we'll see what happens. And I am using the composite cable here. So we'll see, hopefully, if that's in colour or black and white. Oh, we're straight to the splash screen. So that is a really good sign. The little fans come on at the back here. And it is in colour from the composite output. So I've learned something today. That fan's not too noisy, actually. I don't think we're going to need to replace that, so that's good. So when I put the CD in, it should just auto boot. So let's put that to the test if I can see from this angle. There we go. Cross your fingers, everyone. Very little going on there. Now, normally the screen should fade and it should load the CD. And I know this not because I've had a CDTV before, but because back in the day, I had an A570 CD-ROM drive, which goes onto the side of your Amiga 500. More on that in episode 2. So I know how this should behave. And just looking through a crack there, I can see the CD. I can see it in its caddy, and I can see it's not even spinning. Hopefully you can see that too on that shot. So it could be any number of things. So this is the challenge that we're faced with in part 2. I'm also pleased to say that the controller had the batteries taken out, the remote control. So there's a little bit of rust in there, but no leakage. So high hopes for that. But until we have something working, all we can do with this is power the device on and off with this. So it's really not much use to us at the moment. So that's where we are for today. I hope you've enjoyed learning about the history of the CDTV. I hope you've enjoyed the insights from Gail Wellington. I really enjoyed talking to her, and there'll be more from her in future episodes as we continue to explore the history of the CDTV and hopefully get this thing working. Fingers crossed. I hope you'll join me for the rest of the series. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, please do take a moment to and hit that bell so that you're notified when the next episode comes out. It'll be very soon, I promise you. And as always, take care and goodbye.